Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
The folder landed in the center of the table with a sound I will never forget. Not loud, not dramatic, just a soft, definitive thud, the kind that says, "This is finished." My cousin Renata had been smiling since she walked in. That particular smile I'd known my whole life. The one she saved for occasions when she believed she had won something. She smoothed her dress as she sat back, folded her hands, and watched the folder the way a chess player watches a captured queen. It was Grandma Cecile's 81st birthday. The private room at Harrington's was decorated in soft gold and white. Her colors, she always said. 12 people at a long rectangular table. The good china. The occasion that, under any other circumstances, I would have been genuinely glad to attend. I had known it was coming. That's the part no one at that table understood yet. My name is Priya Anand Holloway. I am 39 years old. I have had multiple sclerosis since I was 26, though I wasn't diagnosed until 28, which is its own particular cruelty. 2 years of being told I was anxious, dramatic, seeking attention, imagining things. The irony that my family spent years doing the same thing the medical establishment initially did to me is not lost on me. I've had a long time to sit with it. I was a pediatric occupational therapist for 7 years before my symptoms made full-time clinical work impossible. I transitioned to consultation and training, teaching other therapists adaptive techniques for children with neurological conditions. I worked from home 3 days a week. On good days I drove. On bad days I used a rollator, a forearm crutch, or my wheelchair depending on what my body was negotiating with me about that morning. MS is not a straight line. It is a negotiation conducted daily with a body that has its own opinions. My family had decided at some point in the last 4 years that this negotiation was theater. I don't know exactly when it shifted. My parents, Rohan and Deepa Anand, had been supportive in the early years. My mother came with me to neurology appointments. My father researched disease-modifying therapies with the same systematic intensity he brought to everything. But something changed after my brother Vikram's wedding 3 years ago. I missed the first dance because I was in the hotel room managing a flare. I heard later that Vikram's new wife, Cassie, had made a comment at the reception about how convenient my timing was. And Cassie's opinions, I would come to understand, had an almost gravitational effect on my family's beliefs. Cassie was bright, charming, and deeply invested in the narrative that I received disproportionate parental attention. She was not entirely wrong that my parents worried about me. What she reframed, and what my family gradually accepted, was that this worry was a manipulation I was orchestrating rather than a natural response to a real illness. My cousin Renata was Cassie's closest friend from college. She'd married into the outer ring of our family 3 years before Cassie arrived and had never particularly liked me before that. Cassie gave her a framework and a vocabulary. The two of them together became something efficient and organized. A project. I became that project. The first sign was small. My mother stopped asking about my medication at Christmas. Not dramatically, she simply stopped. Where she had once asked which infusion I was on, whether the fatigue was manageable, whether I needed anything, she now changed the subject with the practiced smoothness of someone who had been coached. I noticed. I said nothing. The second sign was Vikram. He started sending me articles. At first I thought he meant well. Pieces about mindset and chronic illness, about the psychological dimensions of pain, about patients who improved dramatically through lifestyle changes. Then the articles became less subtle. One was titled, bluntly, Munchausen's and the High-Functioning Patient. I did not respond to that one. The third sign was Renata, who had started a private group chat. I found out from my Aunt Mina, who was uncomfortable with what was being said and took a screenshot. The chat was called Family Matters. Its contents, in the screenshot Mina forwarded me at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, included a photograph of me at my friend Danny's birthday 2 months earlier. I was standing. I was smiling. I was holding a glass of sparkling water. The caption, added by Renata, read, "For someone too sick to come to Cassie's baby shower, she looks great, doesn't she?" What the photo didn't show, that I had taken a car service both ways, sat for most of the event, gone home and spent the following 2 days in bed with nerve pain that made my right leg feel like it was wrapped in hot wire. What the photo didn't show, that I had missed Cassie's baby shower because it was an outdoor event in August heat, And heat exposure triggers my relapses, a fact my neurologist had put in writing for my employer 3 years ago. What the photo didn't show, the work it cost me to stand up for that picture and smile and look like myself for 45 seconds. MS is an invisible illness in the moments that matter to other people's judgments. It is extremely visible in the moments that only I witness. I had been a patient of Dr. James Chen for 6 years. He was 54, precise, unhurried, with a particular way of listening that made you feel your symptoms were being taken down as sworn testimony. He had seen me through 2 relapses, 3 medication changes, 1 period of remission that lasted 14 months and made me briefly, dangerously hopeful, and 1 relapse so severe that I used a wheelchair full-time for 4 months. He knew my disease the way a careful reader knows a difficult text, not just the words but the patterns beneath them. When I called him in March, 8 weeks before Grandma Cecile's birthday, I told him what I suspected was being organized. He was quiet for a moment. "You think they've hired someone," he said. "I think Renata made a comment at Easter that was too specific to be guessing," I said. She knew I'd taken the train downtown on a Tuesday in February. She knew I'd walked from the station to the building. She described which side of the street I walked on. Another pause. "What do you need from me, Priya?" This is the thing about Dr. Chen that I have tried to explain to people who don't have a good doctor. He asked what I needed. Not what he thought I needed. What I needed. "I need you to come to my grandmother's birthday," I said. "And I need you to bring Dr. Osei." Dr. Osei was a colleague of Dr. Chen's, a forensic medical consultant who had testified in disability fraud cases, insurance litigation and on 3 occasions elder abuse proceedings. He was not a man you brought to a birthday dinner unless you were expecting the dinner to become something else. Dr. Chen agreed without hesitation. I also called Marcus Webb. Marcus was a detective with the city's financial crimes unit. He was also Danny's husband. And we had been friends, the 4 of us, for 7 years. I had watched him testify in 2 trials. I trusted him the way you trust someone who has never once, in 7 years, told you what you wanted to hear. "Tell me what you know about your brother's company," he said after I'd explained the situation. "Vikram runs a mid-size logistics firm. Started it 5 years ago. Dad invested, I think around $200,000 originally, maybe more. They brought in outside investors 18 months ago. Cassie involved in finances? She's on the board. Nominally. She handles accounts." Marcus was quiet in the specific way he got quiet when he was already running something through in his head. "Send me whatever you have. Articles, filings, anything public. Don't get me anything you shouldn't have." "I know. And Priya, don't tell your family I'm coming." I hadn't planned to. The 8 weeks between that phone call and Grandma Cecile's birthday were not a preparation montage. They were 8 weeks of my actual life, which included a moderate flare in April that kept me off my feet for 11 days, a consultation project with a school district in the suburbs that I completed from my bed on a laptop, a weekly dinner with my friend Sujin where we watched competitive baking shows and did not discuss my family, and a slow, careful accumulation of documentation that I organized into a binder I kept in my home office closet. I was not constructing a revenge scheme. I want to be clear about that because the word gets used and it flattens something that was actually much more exhausted and much more sad. I was protecting myself from people who were going to try to take something from me. My credibility, my disability accommodations, potentially my legal standing as a patient with documented medical needs. I had spoken to an attorney. I understood what was at stake. I was also, if I'm being honest, grieving. The brother who had driven me to my first MRI, who had sat in the waiting room for 2 hours and said nothing useful and everything necessary when I came out, had been replaced, slowly and thoroughly, by someone his wife had persuaded him to become. I grieved that original Vikram quietly, in the spaces between everything else, and tried not to let it become the loudest thing in the room of my own mind. Grandma Cecile's birthday arrived on a Thursday in late May. I wore a forest green wrap dress and the orthopedic flats I'd had custom-fitted the previous fall. My rollator was in my car. I had walked into the restaurant without it. A good day, carefully preserved. I had rested the 2 days prior. I had taken my evening medication the night before and my morning medication that morning and had eaten something substantial at noon because blood sugar interacts with my fatigue in ways I have learned to respect. I arrived early and sat at the far end of the table, next to Grandma Cecile's seat and across from where I had asked the restaurant to place 2 additional chairs. I had made the reservation. I had added Dr. Chin and Marcus to the guest list as colleagues joining for the later portion of the evening. Grandma Cecile arrived at 6:15 on the arm of my Aunt Mina, who knew I had made arrangements and had not asked for specifics. Grandma kissed my cheek and said, "You look well, Beta." She said it the way she said most things, as observation not judgment. She was the only person in my family who had never once questioned what was wrong with me. My parents arrived together, my mother in a sari and my father in his standard dinner jacket. They greeted me warmly, the specific warmth of people who have already decided what the evening will produce and are feeling generous about it in advance. Vikram arrived with Cassie, who was 7 months pregnant and had the particular bright energy of someone who has been told good news is coming. Renata arrived last with her husband Sanjay and she was carrying the folder. I saw it under her arm when she walked in. Manila. Thick. She didn't try to hide it. Dr. Chin and Marcus arrived at 7:15, during the appetizer course. I introduced Dr. Chin as my neurologist and Marcus as a friend, which was accurate. My mother's expression shifted slightly when I said neurologist. She had expected me to bring a date or perhaps no one. My father shook Dr. Chen's hand with the surface warmth he applied to professionals he was in the process of discounting. Renata watched Marcus with the specific attention of someone who had looked at enough surveillance photographs that she recognized what a detective looked like in civilian clothing. Dinner was for 40 minutes, a birthday dinner. Grandma Cecile talked about her garden. My Aunt Mina told a story about a disastrous vacation from 15 years ago that everyone had heard and everyone still laughed at. The food was good. The wine for those drinking was good. I had sparkling water and watched the folder under Renata's chair and felt the particular stillness that comes when you have already accepted what is about to happen. Renata waited until the main plates were cleared. She stood up, which was theater, standing up at a seated dinner for an announcement, and she placed the folder on the table and put her hand on top of it. "I want to say," she began, "that I'm doing this because I love this family. Because I think we've all been carrying something that we're too afraid to name." My mother looked at the tablecloth. My father sat very straight. "Priya." Renata said my name like a verdict. "We hired someone. A private investigator. He followed you for 3 weeks in February and March. And we have his complete report." She slid the folder across the table. It came to rest in the center. "Between us." I said nothing. I looked at it. Then I looked at Dr. Chin. He reached forward and picked it up. This was not what Renata expected. She had expected me to reach for it or to refuse it or to cry or to deny. She had not expected my neurologist to take it with the calm of a man who reads medical literature for the same reason other people breathe, because it is simply what he does. He opened it to the first page. He read. He turned to the second page. Third. His expression did not change. The table was very quiet. Then he closed the folder and slid it not back to Renata but sideways to Marcus. "What are you doing?" Renata asked. Her voice was still controlled but something had shifted. "Reading," Dr. Chin said. That's private. That's our family's. Your family placed it on a table at a restaurant and pushed it across to my patient," Dr. Chin said. "It is now contextually public." He folded his hands. "The interesting part, Renata, may I call you Renata, is what your investigator found in your cousin's brother's financial records while he was surveilling my patient." The silence this time was different. Vikram, who had not spoken since the appetizers, looked up. "What does that mean?" my father said. "It means," Marcus said, setting the folder down and opening his jacket to show his badge. A move so quiet it was almost conversational, "that your PI was thorough. More thorough than you intended to hire him to be. He documented Ms. Anand Holloway's movements as instructed. He also documented the movements of the man she spoke with on the phone during 4 of his surveillance sessions, because he ran the number to establish context. That man was her accountant. And her accountant was also, it turns out, handling a secondary set of books for Vikram Anand's company." The color left Cassie's face first. Vikram's followed 3 seconds later. "I should tell you what Dr. Chin had read in that folder because it matters and because it is, in a different way, its own kind of documentation of what my life actually looks like. The PI, a man named Gerald Foss based on the letterhead, had indeed followed me for 3 weeks. His notes were thorough. He documented me taking the train. He documented me walking from the train station to my consulting firm's downtown office. A walk of approximately 4 blocks. He documented me attending a lunch. He documented me at the grocery store, at Sujean's apartment building, at my physical therapist's office. He noted that I used a rollator on 6 of the 21 days he observed me, and did not on the other 15. His conclusion, which Renata had presumably read before tonight, was that my reported mobility impairment appeared inconsistent with observed behavior. What Gerald Foss had not known, because he was not a neurologist and had not read my medical file, was that 15 ambulatory days out of 21 is consistent with relapsing remitting MS in a period of partial stability. What he had not understood was that using a rollator on days when symptoms are elevated and not using one on days when they are manageable is not evidence of fraud. It is evidence of a dynamic condition being competently managed. What he had not known was that 2 of the days he observed me at the grocery store corresponded to days that, in my personal symptom journal, I had recorded as moderate fatigue days during which I had pushed through a necessary errand and paid for it the following morning. Dr. Chin had read 1 page of that report and understood all of this immediately, because he has treated MS patients for 26 years and he knows what managed symptoms in the community look like versus what fabrication looks like. The distinction was not subtle to him. It was, as he would later state in writing, immediately and unambiguously evident. What Gerald Foss had done, the thing that changed everything, was run a financial background check on Marcus Webb, whom he had photographed meeting me for coffee in March, in order to determine whether Marcus was a romantic partner, a business associate, or relevant to the surveillance in any other way. In doing so, he had accessed Marcus's professional records and discovered that Marcus was a financial crimes detective. He had then done what a careful investigator does when he discovers a complicating factor. He documented everything, including the subcontracted financial research he'd run on people in my immediate circle to establish the full picture of my life. That research had included a public filings search on Vikram's company, Anand Logistics Solutions. And the public filings, read carefully by someone who knew what to look for, told a story that did not match the company's reported revenue for the previous 2 fiscal years. Marcus had been looking at it since April. "I need to ask you a few questions, Vikram," Marcus said. He was using his professional voice now. Even unhurried, the voice of someone who already knows the answer and is offering the person across from them an opportunity to be honest before the opportunity expires. You can't do this here, Cassie said. "This is a birthday dinner." "You brought me here," Marcus said and looked at Renata. "Technically." My grandmother at the head of the table had not moved. She was watching Vikram with the expression of a woman who has lived 81 years and understands that some moments are simply the arrival of what was always going to arrive. The company's Q3 filing from 2 years ago shows revenue of $4.2 million, Marcus said, pulling a folded page from his jacket. He had come prepared, just as I had prepared. And the Q3 bank statements from the same period, obtained via your own PI's subcontractor, show deposits of $2.1 million. The discrepancy, Vikram, is not a rounding error. Vikram said nothing. The difference between reported revenue and actual deposits over an 18-month period, Marcus continued, amounts to approximately $890,000. And the pattern of transfers from the business account to a personal account registered to AC. Anand, Cassie, is documented across 27 transactions. Cassie stood up. "Sit down," my father said. It was the voice he used once in a generation, and Cassie sat down. The table was so quiet I could hear the restaurant beyond the private room. The normal sounds of a normal Thursday, glasses and conversation and someone's light laughter, life continuing at its usual pace while ours broke open. "She's been lying," Cassie said, pointing at me. Her voice had gone to something uglier now, the composure gone. "This is a setup. She arranged this." "I did arrange for my neurologist to attend my grandmother's birthday," I said, "because I knew you were going to try to publicly challenge my medical diagnosis at a family event. So yes, I planned for someone with 26 years of neurological medicine to be present." I paused. "What I didn't arrange was your husband's accounting." "Priya." My mother said my name. I looked at her. She looked at me with an expression I had not seen on her face in 3 years. Something that was trying to find its way back from somewhere far away. "The PI report," Dr. Chin said, addressing my parents directly now. "I want to be precise with you. I have been Priya's treating neurologist for 6 years. I have her complete diagnostic imaging, her lesion mapping across 4 MRI sequences, her relapse history, her medication response data, and her functional assessment scores. There is no clinical ambiguity in her diagnosis. Multiple sclerosis is documented in her central nervous system. The variation in her mobility that your investigator observed is consistent with her disease pattern. It is, in fact, the expected presentation of well-managed relapsing remitting MS. His conclusion was a lay interpretation of medical data by someone with no medical training. He paused. I'll be submitting a formal response to his report, countersigned by Dr. Osei from the Medical Board's Forensic Consultation Panel, which I brought with me tonight. He placed a sealed envelope on the table. Additionally, he said, Priya has been documenting your family's behavior toward her condition for 14 months. The comments. The articles sent to her. The screenshot of the group chat. This documentation, combined with tonight's events, will be reviewed by her attorney for potential action under your state's disability harassment statutes. My Aunt Meena exhaled slowly. Sanjay, Renata's husband, was staring at the tablecloth. Renata had not spoken in 7 minutes. She was still looking at the folder, which was now on Marcus's side of the table. Vikram was taken in for voluntary questioning 2 days later. He came with a lawyer. The lawyer, it emerged, was the same lawyer who had incorporated Anand Logistics Solutions and had been managing their business filings, which complicated matters significantly for the lawyer's professional standing. The $890,000 discrepancy was ultimately confirmed through a forensic accounting audit as $1.1 million across a 30-month period. Cassie had been moving money from the business into a personal account under the rationale, which she explained to investigators in a recorded statement I was later told about by Marcus, who should not have told me but did, that she was managing risk and protecting family assets. The outside investors who had contributed $300,000 to the company's expansion 18 months prior had not been informed. Vikram was charged with 1 count of securities fraud and 2 counts of filing false financial statements. Cassie was charged separately. Both charges were, as of the time I'm writing this, moving through the legal process. Their outcome is not mine to predict. What I know is what happened to Vikram. He was hospitalized 9 days after the birthday dinner. Not arrested, hospitalized. A panic attack so severe his wife called an ambulance from the parking lot of their house. He spent 2 days under observation. My mother called me from the hospital waiting room and I drove there because he was still my brother, and because the Vikram who drove me to my first MRI still lived somewhere inside the person who had let Cassie persuade him into something he would never have chosen on his own. I did not go into his room. I sat with my mother in the corridor for an hour. She cried. I did not. I held her hand and thought about the 14 months of screenshots and documented cruelty that I had organized into a binder in my closet, and thought about the moment she had stopped asking about my medication, and tried to figure out whether forgiveness and grief could exist in the same sentence without one of them collapsing. I'm still working that out. There are things that did not get resolved at Grandma Cecile's birthday dinner. My father did not apologize that night. He shook Dr. Chen's hand when the doctor left and said, "Thank you for coming," as though Dr. Chen had simply attended as a social guest. The apology came 3 weeks later in a phone call, and it was the careful, organized apology of a man who has spent time constructing it rather than the immediate apology of a man who felt it. I received it. I told him I heard him. I did not tell him that receiving an apology and recovering from what made it necessary are 2 different timelines, and mine was going to be longer than his. Renata sent a text 4 days after the dinner. It said, "I hope you know I only wanted to help the family." I read it twice and then showed it to Sujin, who said several things in response that are not appropriate to transcribe here but were deeply satisfying to hear. I did not reply to Renata. Some silences are their own kind of statement. My grandmother called me the day after the dinner. She said, "I'm sorry that was your birthday experience, Beta." I said, "It was your birthday, Grandma. I'm sorry it was yours." She laughed, the particular laugh of someone who has outlived a great deal. "I've had 81 of them," she said. "Some are quiet and some are not. I prefer the honest ones." She paused. "Will you come for tea this week?" I said yes. I went on Thursday. She made the cardamom chai she has made since I was 7 years old. We sat in her garden, which is mostly raised beds now because her knees are not what they were, and talked about her roses and about a documentary she had watched about migratory birds, and about absolutely nothing that had happened at the birthday dinner. It was the best 2 hours I had in May. Gerald Foss, the PI, called my attorney's office voluntarily in the second week of June. He was, my attorney told me, apologetic in a professional sense, which means he understood that his report had been used in a way that created legal exposure for him and he was getting ahead of it. He provided a full accounting of what he had been hired to do and what he had found, including the financial subcontracting, which he had done without being asked to because he was thorough in exactly the way that had undone his clients. He also said, my attorney reported, that he had suspected within the first week of surveillance that the subject, me, had a genuine medical condition based on what he observed, but that he had completed the job as hired. I'm not sure what to do with that information. I have put it somewhere I am not looking at right now. I am still a consulting occupational therapist. I still work 3 days from home and travel to client sites on my better weeks. I still use my rollator on the days that require it and walk without it on the days that don't, and neither of those facts is a contradiction or a performance. My most recent MRI, run in July, showed no new lesion activity. Dr. Chen called it stable. I sat in his office and listened to the word stable and felt it the way you feel a handrail in the dark. Not beautiful but real and necessary in there. I have a lawsuit pending against my cousin Renata, her husband, my brother Vikram, and Cassie for disability harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. My attorney estimates it will settle. I do not know what I will do with the money if it does. I am thinking about a fund for patients with invisible disabilities who need legal assistance navigating exactly the kind of documentation process that I spent 14 months building. That is early thinking. I am noting it here in case I need to be held to it. I am working on relearning how to talk to my parents. It is slow. There are conversations I can have with my mother now that I couldn't have in March, and conversations I cannot have yet that I think I will be able to have in a year. I'm not rushing it. I understand that families are long stories and this chapter is not the last one. I planted a garden this summer, small in containers on my balcony, because I do not have Grandma Cecile's knees or her garden. Tomatoes. Herbs. One small rose in a deep pot that I bought on a good day when I felt optimistic about roses. It bloomed in August. I took a photograph and sent it to Grandma, who sent back a voice message saying she was proud of me in the general way she's proud of living things that persist. I saved the voice message. I play it sometimes. The thing about MS that my family never understood, that most people who haven't lived with it never understand, is that managing it well looks, to outside observers, like not having it. The medication that prevents relapses looks like not having relapses. The pacing, the rest, the careful allocation of energy to the tasks that matter. It all produces, on good days, a person who looks functional, who looks present, who looks, to a PI taking photographs from across the street, like someone who is fine. The management is the disease. The management is what MS looks like when you're doing it right. I have been doing it right for 11 years. I have done it right through 2 relapses and 3 medication changes and a period of remission and a period of return. I have done it right through a career pivot and 14 months of family surveillance and a birthday dinner that became something else. I have done it right on days when doing it right meant sitting in my car outside the physical therapist's office for 10 minutes before I could make my legs cooperate with the door handle, and on days when it meant walking 4 blocks from a train station and eating lunch with a colleague and coming home and lying down for 3 hours afterward. Gerald Foss photographed the 4 blocks. He missed the 3 hours. He missed 11 years of 3 hours, 1,000 mornings of negotiation, every good day that cost a bad day to produce. My neurologist understood that immediately from 1 page of a PI's report, because he has read my body's testimony for 6 years with the attention it deserves. I have been waiting my entire adult life for someone official to read it correctly. At Grandma Cecile's birthday, after Marcus and Dr. Chen had said everything that needed to be said, and after Vikram and Cassie had gone quiet in the specific way people go quiet when the room has reorganized itself around a truth they cannot relocate, I looked at my grandmother. She was watching me from the head of the table. She had the expression she always has, the one I have been trying to decode since childhood, the one that seems to contain amusement and sorrow and patience in exactly equal portions. She raised her water glass toward me. I raised mine back. She did not say anything. She didn't need to. 81 years had given her an economy with words that I hoped to develop eventually. I did not feel victorious. I want to say that plainly because stories like this are supposed to end with triumph, and what I felt was something more complicated than triumph. I felt seen, which is different. I felt tired, which is always present. I felt something loosening that had been held tight for 14 months. And underneath all of it, running quietly like a current beneath the dinner conversation and the folder and the badge and the envelope, was grief. For the brother who drove me to my first MRI, for the family that had been easier to belong to before someone persuaded them I was lying, for the version of this dinner that might have existed if Cassie had not made a comment at a reception 3 years ago and Renata had not picked it up and my mother had not eventually slowly let it in. That grief does not have a resolution yet. I'm not sure it should. What I have is a stable MRI. A neurologist who knows how to read a report. A detective who is paying attention. A grandmother who raised her glass. And a small rose on my balcony that bloomed in August, against no one's expectations but mine.